Libby. Artist Libby Howard is a descendant of the Nugi people of Molgumpin in the Quandamoka, which is the Moreton Bay area. Known for her early work as a urban graffiti artist under the pseudonym of Mas Marikad and her performance-based community activism, Howard's recent series, which is called Already Occupied, engages a continual process of recalling, rehearing, remapping, recontextualizing, decolonizing, and reinstating on country that which colonization has denied Australia's First Peoples. This political practice engages traditional custodians in the evolution of ephemeral installations on mainland country, which has become highly urbanized and calls for an artistic response that seeks to uncover and reinstate the cultural significance of place, which always was and remains to be there. Her current place-based sound and video work engages directly with politically charged ideas of national and international significance. We are very lucky to have her speak to our workshop today, and I hope that it provides us with a whole bunch of stimulating ideas that we can use tomorrow in our workshop as well. So over to you, Libby.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to thinking with you all today and tomorrow as well. So I'm going to just greet you in language. Bigi Marumba Nari Libby Howard Nugi Kondamuka Yura Nyara Yura Baru Mala Jinabara Baran Nali Marumba Balga Nagam Jayala Wanyai Nali Dandra. So I said, hello, my name's Libby and I am Nugi Kondamuka, and it's a really beautiful day here on Jinabara country. I'm currently in a caravan. I've got office in a van on country, on my partner's country, which I'm loving. And I would like to acknowledge all the Indigenous people and the Jinabara people whose country I'm on, and all the countries that you are on today as well. Might just change my light, give you a bit more light. Swinging. I just need to also acknowledge the my Kondamuka country people who have worked very hard to make sure that we still have our language. And I am learning to re-speak and understand a language that was threatened because we weren't able to speak our language right up until the 1970s. Government policies banned and discouraged Aboriginal people from speaking our own languages. And I'm really honoured to be talking to you today. I've written some notes, so I'll just keep referring to them as I speak, just to make sure that I don't miss stuff that I really want to share with you. So as a Nugi woman whose ancestral lands and waters are Molgumpin, which is Moreton Island in the Quandamuka. So the Quandamuka is Moreton Bay, and that country is just off the coast of Brisbane, between across from Bribie Island, which is in Queensland, and across from Brisbane and right up to Yugambeh country on the Gold Coast. I just recently left Yugambeh country to set up camp here on Jinabara country. But as an Aboriginal person, we often come up against the borders in ways of thinking, but for us, we've been traveling these countries for hundreds of thousands of years, and Jinabara country is very important to us because that's where the Bunya Festival, this is where the Bunya Festival is held. So I'm going to talk about my arts practice. It takes the form of simultaneously listening, calling out to, knowing and understanding country that I belong to and country that I am invited by other Aboriginal people to work on. Through a cultural calling out and listening and understanding, which in language, which is actually a Bunjalung word, or Yugambeh Bunjalung, Gangalanji, And the meaning is to call out, to listen, and to understand as one single process. So when I came across this word, I was working on a project in Tullabudgera Creek, and I was spending a lot of time talking to different traditional owners, and the concept and word kept coming to me. And it really speaks to me that as Aboriginal people, we would have a word that specifically means to call out, listen, and understand all at the same time. So I attempt to do this in my practice. I'm calling out and listening to an intergenerational sense of knowing and understanding country. I'm going to share a screen with you so that you can see some pictures while I'm talking. So hopefully share sound and, oh, not my Zoom, that's wrong. Should be able to. Sorry, I can't see my Safari screen at the moment. That would be right, wouldn't it? Maybe if I click on it, it will come up. I might just have to share my desktop, but also has my notes. Sorry.
No, it's all good. If you click on share screen, so like unclick share screen and then click again, see if that works now that you've opened the Safari. Sometimes it does that and it doesn't show the Safari. Otherwise, the desktop is fine, whatever works for you.
All right, sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
Screen. There we go.
Yes.
Okay. So through Gangalanji, I am enacting a process of re-remembering with my country and with my kin. My work engages a continual process that we spoke of before about recalling, so calling out, hearing, remapping, so going over the same places that my ancestors have for generations, recontextualizing, so doing it in the here and now, decolonizing, and reinstating, which is really important to me, on country that which colonization has denied my people, but also really importantly has denied all people who have come here and should be able to have the right to connect properly to country, place in its memory and presence. So Gangalanji could be described as a spiritual process, but it is also a very political practice. I must follow protocol as taught to me by my elders, and I regularly engage with traditional custodians in the process of making my work. And, you know, I'm regularly pulled up on different things that I might be doing wrong as well. So I'm going to share with you, has the photo changed? Has the photo changed?
Yes, it's changed. All good.
Cool. So many of my installations, performances, and sound works are executed on country which has become highly urbanized. So for a long time, I was working on the Gold Coast, which is a place where my ancestors visited regularly for different ceremonies. Particularly, there was exchanges around the mullet when the mullet run was on, and we had festivals. These places call for an artistic response that seeks to uncover and reinstate the cultural significance of that space, which always was and remains there. So as an Aboriginal person, I am constantly remembering how my ancestors walked country and what they may have been seeing, and then bringing all of that into the present. My work on country is a re-remembering process that is enacted and embodied. As I walk country, I make art and practice culture. I am often walking a thin crust of concrete. Gangalanji Bajra, calling out, listening, knowing, footsteps. Tracing the scars, the cracks where culture can show itself, and ancient voices call out to me from beneath these concrete crusts. So when I was thinking about the memories and geography, I thought the best thing for me to do would just to show you some of my works so that you can contextualize that in the ways that you have been thinking. And the first work that I wanted to show you is one of the first works I did in my Already Occupied series. So this work began because so you heard before that I used to be a graffiti artist. So I've always worked in an urban context. And then I went over to South Stradbroke Island and didn't take any art material. And I began to work ephemerally on country in the process of listening, because I knew I had known that my grandfather had spent a lot of time on South Stradbroke Island because he lived and worked on the oyster camps in early colonial days, when the Aboriginal people were working over there on the oyster farms. And so I was making work ephemerally. And then when I came back to the Gold Coast, I just continued that process. And when I was on the Gold Coast, what I was seeing was these road signs and road works. So I continued to make installations that showed my frame of reference. So this is an original work from my Already Occupied series of ephemeral site-specific works. The claim that a site is already occupied talks back to the myth of Terra Nullius and asserts Aboriginal sovereignty and the return of Aboriginal governance. I also like that I talk about the return to Aboriginal governance with the use of what I now term tools of occupation. So these road signs and star pickets, because I believe that Aboriginal governance over this country is what we need to restore it, especially in times with such severe threats of climate change. So it's interesting maybe if I talk about how through my listening to my work and to country, this Already Occupied series of works actually came about. So I'll show you another work which is called Custodian. So this work was done in those early days of moving from a graffiti artist into a more conceptual ephemeral artist. And I was asked to do a work for a project at Miami, and I was really just allowing myself to be in the space. So on the morning of the show, I didn't know what I would present. So I have a very deep connection with Tallebudgera Creek. So I walked in Tallebudgera Creek and I collected the sand and mud from the creek. And I had known from conversations with family and from traditional owners that Tallebudgera Creek was a meeting place. It's not far from a Bora ground. And it's a meeting place because it used to be so full of fish. I've heard stories that people have said that Tallebudgera Creek was black because of the number of fish that were in it. I know that it was also fished out. And so I spent a lot of time walking particular spots in Tallebudgera Creek, and I just let the creek talk up. I just listened to it while I collected materials. I put the mud and sand on the road in Miami outside the gallery, which is not far from Jebrabel and Bora. The Bora, for some people may not know, is a meeting place or a ceremony place, and there's one just near McDonald's at Miami. I let the river mud and the sand talk up through the bitumen. I was asked to protect the installation from the traffic, and I placed the traffic cones down and I watched and listened to the conversation. I watched Aboriginal law speak to white law. I wrote custodian in fluoro orange paint. I still wasn't sure what the work was saying. I wondered if instead of writing custodian, I should have written custody instead. I looked, listened, and understood the work. I think it's about how custodianship of the land is managed under white law. It's about how I see and hear country through the bitumen. Maybe it says hazard, maybe it says already occupied. And that was the birth and the listening process of the Already Occupied series. And this work went on, and I am going to show you a film that then I made using a drone, and I took these symbols back and I put them back on my country, which is less urbanized, on Morton Island. So I will show you part of this film.
Minya yenda yarini.
Could you hear the sound?
Yes.
We did. Yes.
I was thinking, I don't know if I put the sound on.
Absolutely.
Yes, very clear.
So, I mean, even just looking at that, then I realize how, you know, important it is for me to continually assert this experience of re-remembering on my country and learning, but living in two worlds and two ways of being with the tools of occupation and colonization, which I now use in performative rites or actions. And I continue to make these actions on my ancestral country. I enact these artistic rites using country, ochre, mud, sand, and water in conversation with what I call materials of occupation, such as road cones, star pickets, concrete, and traffic signs. And these activations recode these materials and hive as wayfinders, privileging my frame of reference and revealing a language which has always occupied this continent and that I'm always seeing, hearing, remembering, and engaging with. So everyday signs and objects are code switched to foreground the relationship between exploited land and the materials from which colonization is constructed, turning the tools of occupation into a visual language of Aboriginal resistance. And I have taken this idea from the visual. I've got a big wasp in here. From the visual also to sound, and this came actually to me very early in creating works in Tallebudgera Creek, because as I was making an ephemeral work, I could hear the sound of a pole driver in the background, and that has kept coming through with the use of star pickets. Now I use them as contemporary clapsticks because that rhythm, as I was making that work on the sand, reminded me of clapsticks. So the next work I'm going to show you, I don't have a video of. It's a recent work which Lara saw at Bleach, and I've just got this photo from my Instagram. And this work is called Over Here. So Over Here is a work that was presented at Bleach. So it was at Burleigh on Yugambeh country. And this is a photo from a sound performance I did called Amplification Affirmation Spirit Song. That's the second iteration of, or the third of one of these performances. Here I play the sound of oyster shells in a concrete mixer and amplify their story. I make loud the exploitation of one architecture overlaid by another. This work amplifies these sounds in a call for healing. Inside that cement mixer, you can see down to the right of the picture, there's some oyster shells. The oyster shells are inside the cement mixer, but they're also mixed with Yugambeh ochre, and ochre is often used as a tool for healing culturally. So this work references the Aboriginal middens, which were sacred sites which were created over tens of thousands of years from the remnants of shellfish that were carefully stacked in deliberate piles for after feasts. So when I visit places like Mulgumpin or Stradbroke Island, also at Jelligal, at Burleigh, there's big middens, and they're quite, I mean, the feeling that I get when I see these middens is quite amazing, because I know that my ancestors have eaten here and shared food for hundreds of thousands of years, and I think also they have a lot to teach us about how we treat our waste. But this performance is about the amplification of our memories of the exploitation of these resources and the damaged ecosystems resulting from their use in the construction of colonial Queensland throughout the 1800s. Because these oyster shells from the Quandamooka were crushed and burned to make lime, mortar, and aggregate used in the manufacturing of concrete. So sacred middens were desecrated for this production as they were viewed as convenient sources of lime. These actions caused the destruction of our middens, our architecture, and the attempted erasure of evidence of our occupation dating back tens of thousands of years. Through sound performance, I regularly deconstruct the instruments of occupation, reclamation, classification, extraction, and greed. I play star pickets like contemporary clapsticks. I amplify the sound of country as it is sieved for evidence through archaeological sieves. I play the sound of water extraction through pumps and sprinklers. And in this work, I play the oyster shells through a concrete mixer. I also sieve ochre through the archaeological sieve and then use it in a rite for healing. So through this work, we can listen and remember and call for healing. So I have actually got one final work that I wanted to talk to you about, which is also a listening and remembering work. There's two works. So the first one was called Nugi Bajara, and that I used the word Bajara before. It means footsteps, and I am a Nugi person. So the Nugi people were on Morgumpin, which is Moreton Island. And then later on we moved to Minjarrabah, which is Stradbroke Island. So about 2 years ago, I believe, maybe 3, I was asked to do a residency by Liquid Architecture, who are a sound arts organisation in Melbourne, and the residency was at the Botanical Gardens in Brisbane. And I had 2 weeks to come up with a concept, and so I engaged my listening and remembering practice and walked the gardens. There was a lot of talk about me working in the Australian native section, but I was really called to the tropical dome. The reason why was because I sat in there for a long time and I thought about where all those plants had come from, and I realized that they had been collected through colonization, and that all come from colonized countries, and they were the plants that were collected through the voyages of discovery. And as at the time I was trying to reconnect with my own language, I wondered what it would be like for the plants to hear the languages, their original languages. So within 2 weeks, I had to quickly get as many native language speakers that I could to speak language for, with, and beside the plants. So, and I got them to record language. So we had only native languages, no pidgin, and they all said, "Why am I here?" And then the Yagara language said, "What are you doing here?" And then I interplayed them with about 8 or 9 speakers in that dome. So when you walk through, you heard, along with the plants, the language that I don't know how long it had been since those plants had heard their original languages for. And I also recorded rain, because the rain can't get into that dome. And I also recorded the sound of native bees. So as you walked through around and around, that's what you heard. I then got asked to do a reiteration of that work in Berlin, which was quite a amazing opportunity, because I also knew that there had recently been some repatriation to Australia of some of our ancestors from Germany. And I thought that through speaking with and to the plants, that we could also speak about the importance of repatriating the remains that had been taken through colonization. It also privileges the plants and their story, which we don't often consider. So what I did was, I couldn't really do it. Well, I found a terrariumist, and what we did was we got plants from a similar dome or a hothouse in the botanical gardens. And I also found out that in the botanical gardens in Berlin, there was an Australian wattle. So I also had that in the show. And so I'm going to play you a little bit of the soundtrack, some of the pictures from this show. I'll start again.
Kapapunga lau ina langwe. Kapapunga lau ina langwe. Kapapunga lau ina langwe.
Bakit ako nandito?
Another of the covered degree key.
Saya nakuha o i. Saya
Another of the covered degree key.
Saya nakuha o i.
Kino nibi?
Opo ako nang gini.
Minyango nari gapi.
Another of the covered degree key.
Bakit ako nandito?
Saya nakuha o i.
Another
Saya nakuha o i.
of the covered.
Bakit ako nandito?
Oh,
Kino
opo ako nang
nibi?
gini.
Bakit ako nandito?
Kapapunga lau ina langwe. Kapapunga lau ina langwe. Kapapunga lau ina langwe.
So that's all my work.